Question 1. Consider a scenario where a Mississippi enhanced firearm permit holder is attending a community event hosted at a privately owned convention center. Upon arrival, the permit holder notices no explicit signage prohibiting firearms at the entrance or within the main public areas. However, the permit holder is unsure if there are specific restrictions for certain areas within the convention center or if the venue has an unposted policy. What is the most responsible course of action for the permit holder to take? Option A. Assume that carrying a concealed firearm is permitted due to the absence of any visible prohibition signs. Option B. Proceed to carry the concealed firearm, relying on the general understanding that permit holders are allowed to carry unless explicitly forbidden. Option C. Leave the firearm secured in their vehicle and forego carrying it for the duration of the event. Option D. Politely inquire with the convention center's management or event organizers about their policy on carrying firearms. The correct answer is D. Politely inquire with the convention center's management or event organizers about their policy on carrying firearms. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a permit holder in Mississippi who is considering carrying a firearm in a location where the rules are not immediately clear. The challenge lies in balancing the right to self-defense with the legal obligations and responsibilities associated with carrying a concealed firearm. Misinterpreting or disregarding signage can lead to serious legal consequences, including permit revocation and criminal charges. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Mississippi law and the specific rules of private establishments. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively seeking clarification and adhering to posted signage. This approach is correct because Mississippi law under Miss. Code Ann. Section 45-9-101 et sec. grants private property owners the right to prohibit the carrying of firearms on their premises. Posted signs serve as legal notice of these prohibitions. By choosing to verify the policy directly with management when signage is unclear or absent, the permit holder demonstrates a commitment to understanding and respecting the property owner's rights and the governing laws, thereby avoiding potential violations. This proactive stance ensures lawful conduct and upholds the integrity of the concealed carry permit. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that because no explicit prohibition is posted, carrying a concealed firearm is permitted. This is a failure to recognize that private property owners have the right to restrict firearms, and their silence does not equate to permission. This approach risks violating the property owner's wishes and potentially Mississippi law if the property owner later asserts their right to prohibit firearms. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the absence of a visible sign and proceed to carry the firearm. This overlooks the possibility of unposted policies or the property owner's right to verbally prohibit firearms. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the property owner's authority, which can lead to legal repercussions. A further incorrect approach is to proceed with carrying the firearm based on a personal interpretation of the situation, without seeking any form of clarification. This is a subjective and potentially dangerous approach that prioritizes personal convenience or perceived right over legal compliance and the rights of the property owner. It fails to account for the nuances of Mississippi's concealed carry laws and the rights of private property owners. Professional reasoning. Professionals carrying firearms in Mississippi should adopt a when in doubt, ask mentality. This involves understanding that the right to carry is conditional and subject to the laws of Mississippi and the rules of private property. Before entering any establishment, especially one with unclear signage, permit holders should make a reasonable effort to ascertain the rules. This might involve looking for posted signs, checking the establishment's website, or, as a last resort, politely inquiring with management. This systematic approach ensures compliance, protects the permit holder from legal jeopardy, and demonstrates responsible firearm ownership. Question 2. During the evaluation of a Mississippi enhanced firearm permit application, an applicant discloses a prior arrest for simple assault in Mississippi, which was later dismissed and did not result in a conviction. What is the most appropriate course of action for the permit issuing authority? Option A. Immediately deny the permit application based on the presence of an arrest for assault, regardless of the outcome. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of the arrest record, including the circumstances of the dismissal, and assess the applicant's overall history to determine eligibility under Mississippi firearm laws. Option C. Request a formal plea agreement from the applicant related to the dismissed charge to assess their current disposition. Option D. Approve the permit application without further investigation, assuming the dismissal means no eligibility issues exist. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of the arrest record, including the circumstances of the dismissal, and assess the applicant's overall history to determine eligibility under Mississippi firearm laws. Explanation: during the evaluation of a firearm permit application in Mississippi, a scenario arises where the applicant has a prior arrest for simple assault that did not result in a conviction. This situation presents a professional challenge because it requires careful judgment to balance the applicant's right to apply for a permit with the state's interest in public safety, as outlined by Mississippi firearm laws. The decision hinges on interpreting how such an arrest, even without a conviction, might impact eligibility under the Mississippi Code. The best approach involves thoroughly investigating the circumstances surrounding the arrest and reviewing the applicant's complete criminal history, including any records of diversion programs or expungements related to the charge. This is correct because Mississippi law, specifically concerning firearm permits, often looks beyond mere convictions to consider the totality of an applicant's history and any potential indicators of unsuitability. While a simple arrest without a conviction may not automatically disqualify an applicant, the underlying facts of the incident could still be relevant to assessing their propensity for violence or their fitness to carry a firearm. A comprehensive review ensures compliance with the spirit and letter of Mississippi's firearm regulations, which aim to permit responsible citizens while preventing those who pose a risk from obtaining permits. An incorrect approach would be to automatically deny the permit solely based on the existence of the arrest, regardless of its disposition. This fails to adhere to Mississippi law, which typically requires a conviction or specific findings of unsuitability to deny a permit. Another incorrect approach is to approve the permit without any further inquiry into the arrest, effectively ignoring a potentially relevant piece of the applicant's history. This overlooks the state's legitimate interest in ensuring that permit holders do not pose a danger, even if the arrest did not lead to a conviction. Finally, relying solely on the applicant's self-reporting without independent verification of the arrest's outcome would be professionally unsound and could lead to a flawed decision. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes due diligence and adherence to Mississippi's specific statutory requirements for firearm permits. This involves understanding that while convictions are primary disqualifiers, other aspects of an applicant's history may warrant further investigation to ensure public safety and uphold the integrity of the permitting process. Question 3. Research into the application process for an enhanced firearm permit in Mississippi reveals an applicant with a prior conviction for aggravated assault 10 years ago, for which they completed probation 5 years ago and have no subsequent criminal record. Considering the requirements of Mississippi Code Annotated Title 45, Chapter 9, what is the most appropriate course of action for the issuing authority? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, specifically examining if the prior aggravated assault conviction constitutes a disqualifying offense under Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, and assess any other statutory disqualifiers. Option B. Focus solely on the applicant's lack of recent criminal activity and issue the permit, without further investigation into the specifics of the prior aggravated assault conviction. Option C. Issue the enhanced firearm permit immediately, as the applicant has no current criminal charges and has completed their probation. Option D. Deny the enhanced firearm permit based on a general concern that a past conviction for aggravated assault, regardless of its age or completion of sentence, indicates a potential risk to public safety. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, specifically examining if the prior aggravated assault conviction constitutes a disqualifying offense under Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, and assess any other statutory disqualifiers. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's desire for a permit with the strict requirements of Mississippi law regarding firearm permits, specifically concerning the applicant's past behavior and its potential impact on public safety. Misinterpreting or misapplying the law can lead to either an unwarranted denial of a permit or the issuance of a permit to an individual who may pose a risk, both of which have serious legal and ethical ramifications. Careful judgment is required to ensure adherence to Mississippi Code Annotated Title 45, Chapter 9. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history and any relevant court records to determine if any disqualifying factors, as outlined in Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, are present. This approach prioritizes public safety and legal compliance by directly addressing the statutory criteria for permit issuance. Specifically, Section 45-9-101, 1a through k, lists various offenses and conditions that would disqualify an applicant. A diligent review ensures that the decision is based on objective legal standards rather than subjective assumptions. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves issuing the permit solely based on the applicant's assertion that their past issues are resolved and that they have no current criminal charges. This fails to acknowledge the statutory requirement to examine past convictions and disqualifying events, regardless of current charges. Mississippi law does not permit a waiver of past disqualifying offenses simply because an applicant claims they are resolved. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit based on a general feeling of unease about the applicant's character, without concrete evidence of a disqualifying factor as defined by Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101. This approach is subjective and lacks the legal basis required for a permit decision, potentially leading to an unlawful denial. A third incorrect approach is to focus only on the most recent offense and overlook prior disqualifying offenses that are still relevant under Mississippi law. The statute requires consideration of a broader range of past conduct, and ignoring earlier disqualifying events would be a failure to apply the law comprehensively. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a systematic decision-making process. This begins with a complete understanding of the relevant Mississippi statutes governing firearm permits, particularly Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101. They must then meticulously gather and review all required documentation, including criminal history records. Each piece of information must be evaluated against the specific disqualifying criteria outlined in the law. If any disqualifying factor is identified, the permit must be denied in accordance with the statute. If no disqualifying factors are found, the permit should be issued. This process ensures fairness, consistency, and adherence to the law, protecting both the applicant's rights and public safety. Question 4. Market research demonstrates that students preparing for the Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit exam often have questions about the legal nuances of self-defense. If a student asks about the specific legal justification required to use deadly force in Mississippi, what is the most appropriate response for an instructor? Option A. Provide a general overview of firearm safety and basic marksmanship, stating that legal justifications for using deadly force are complex and best left to legal professionals to interpret without specific statutory reference. Option B. Advise the student that the use of deadly force is generally permissible when they feel their life is in danger, as this is a common understanding across most states. Option C. Suggest that the student research the laws of other states that have more lenient self-defense statutes, as this might provide a broader perspective on potential legal justifications. Option D. Explain the legal justification for using deadly force in Mississippi by referencing the relevant sections of the Mississippi Code that define self-defense and the conditions under which deadly force is permissible, and clarify the requirements for obtaining a concealed carry permit under Mississippi law. The correct answer is D. Explain the legal justification for using deadly force in Mississippi by referencing the relevant sections of the Mississippi Code that define self-defense and the conditions under which deadly force is permissible, and clarify the requirements for obtaining a concealed carry permit under Mississippi law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearm permit instructor in Mississippi due to the potential for misinformation to impact a student's understanding of crucial safety and legal requirements. Misinterpreting or misrepresenting the legal framework surrounding firearm ownership and use can lead to serious consequences for the student, including permit denial, legal penalties, and most importantly, compromised safety. The instructor has a duty to provide accurate and up-to-date information based on Mississippi law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice is to directly address the student's question by referencing the specific Mississippi Code sections that govern the use of deadly force and the requirements for obtaining a concealed carry permit. This approach ensures that the information provided is legally accurate, directly answers the student's concern, and educates them on the precise legal standards they must adhere to. Mississippi law, particularly concerning self-defense and permit qualifications, requires a thorough understanding of statutory language and judicial interpretations. By citing the relevant code, the instructor demonstrates a commitment to legal compliance and responsible firearm education, aligning with the principles of the Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit Exam's optional curriculum, which aims to deepen understanding beyond basic safety. Incorrect approaches analysis, providing a general statement about common sense, or relying on anecdotal evidence from other states fails to meet the legal and ethical obligations of an instructor in Mississippi. Such an approach risks misinforming the student about Mississippi-specific laws, which may differ significantly from other jurisdictions. This could lead the student to believe they have legal protections or obligations that do not exist under Mississippi law, potentially resulting in dangerous or illegal actions. Furthermore, failing to cite specific Mississippi Code sections when asked about legal requirements demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the precise legal framework governing firearm permits and self-defense in the state. This can undermine the credibility of the instruction and the student's confidence in their legal understanding. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must prioritize accuracy and legal compliance. When faced with a question about legal requirements, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the specific jurisdiction's laws, Mississippi in this case. 2. Locating the relevant statutes or regulations. 3. Clearly and accurately explaining those laws to the student. 4. Avoiding generalizations or information from other jurisdictions unless explicitly comparing and contrasting with Mississippi law. 5. Emphasizing that legal advice should be sought from qualified legal counsel for specific situations. Question 5. The control framework reveals that a Mississippi firearm permit holder, after a brief moment of distraction, realizes their handgun was left on a coffee table in their living room while their young child was present in the house. The permit holder immediately retrieves the handgun. Considering Mississippi's firearm regulations and the principles of responsible gun ownership, which of the following actions best addresses the situation and mitigates potential legal and ethical concerns? Option A. Assume the child is aware of the danger and will not attempt to touch the handgun, and therefore take no further action beyond retrieving it from the coffee table. Option B. Verbally instruct the child not to touch the handgun and then leave it on a high shelf in the same room. Option C. Immediately unload the handgun and place it in a locked gun safe, ensuring the ammunition is stored separately and the safe is inaccessible to the child. Option D. Move the handgun to a bedroom closet, out of the child's immediate sight, but without unloading it or using a locking mechanism. The correct answer is C. Immediately unload the handgun and place it in a locked gun safe, ensuring the ammunition is stored separately and the safe is inaccessible to the child. Explanation. The control framework reveals a scenario where a permit holder in Mississippi faces a potential violation due to their firearm storage method, raising questions about their understanding of Mississippi's firearm laws and responsible gun ownership. Professional challenge lies in interpreting the nuances of Mississippi law regarding secure firearm storage, especially when the firearm is accessible to a minor, even if unintentionally. This requires careful consideration of legal obligations and ethical responsibilities to prevent harm. The best approach involves immediately securing the firearm in a manner that complies with Mississippi law, specifically focusing on preventing unauthorized access by minors. This means ensuring the firearm is unloaded and stored in a locked container or secured with a trigger lock, separate from ammunition, in a location inaccessible to children. This aligns with Mississippi's emphasis on responsible gun ownership and the legal duty to prevent firearms from falling into the wrong hands, particularly those of minors, thereby mitigating potential legal repercussions and upholding ethical standards of firearm safety. An approach that involves merely moving the firearm to a different room without ensuring it is unloaded and locked is insufficient. This fails to meet the legal requirement for secure storage in Mississippi, as it still leaves the firearm accessible to a minor, even if not in the immediate vicinity. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence in preventing potential accidents, Another unacceptable approach would be to dismiss the concern as minor, assuming the child would not attempt to access the firearm. This is a dangerous assumption that disregards the unpredictable nature of children and the serious legal and ethical ramifications of firearm negligence. Mississippi law places a clear responsibility on the permit holder to ensure secure storage, regardless of perceived risk. Finally, an approach that involves only verbally instructing the child not to touch the firearm is also inadequate. While communication is important, it does not constitute secure storage under Mississippi law. Verbal warnings do not physically prevent access and therefore do not fulfill the legal obligation to secure the firearm, leaving the permit holder vulnerable to legal penalties and ethical criticism. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical responsibility. This involves understanding the specific requirements of Mississippi firearm laws regarding storage, assessing the potential risks to minors, and implementing the most secure storage methods available. When in doubt, seeking clarification from legal counsel or relevant authorities is advisable to ensure full compliance and uphold the highest standards of responsible firearm ownership. Question 6. The performance metrics show a significant increase in the number of applications for Mississippi enhanced firearm permits that are flagged for further review due to incomplete or potentially disqualifying information, leading to processing delays. A permit applicant, Mr. Jones, has provided all standard documentation, but a review of his application reveals a past misdemeanor conviction for simple assault that occurred 5 years ago. The Mississippi Code outlines specific criteria for enhanced firearm permit eligibility. Which of the following actions best reflects the appropriate response to Mr. Jones' application, considering Mississippi's regulatory framework for firearm permits? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of Mr. Jones' application, specifically examining the nature of the simple assault misdemeanor conviction and comparing it against the disqualifying offenses listed in the Mississippi Code for enhanced firearm permit eligibility, while also ensuring all other statutory requirements are met. Option B. Deny Mr. Jones' application immediately based on the presence of any misdemeanor conviction, regardless of its nature or the specific provisions of the Mississippi Code regarding enhanced permits. Option C. Request Mr. Jones to provide a notarized letter from his former employer stating his good character and reliability, as this is a common practice for assessing applicant suitability. Option D. Approve Mr. Jones' application without further investigation into the misdemeanor conviction, citing the time elapsed since the offense and the applicant's otherwise clean record. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough review of Mr. Jones' application, specifically examining the nature of the simple assault misdemeanor conviction and comparing it against the disqualifying offenses listed in the Mississippi Code for enhanced firearm permit eligibility, while also ensuring all other statutory requirements are met. Explanation. The performance metrics show a concerning trend in permit renewal applications for Mississippi residents seeking enhanced firearm permits. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's right to pursue a permit with the state's responsibility to ensure public safety and uphold the integrity of the permitting process. Misinterpreting or misapplying the Mississippi Code regarding firearm permits can lead to legal repercussions for the applicant, the permitting authority, and potentially compromise public safety. Careful judgment is required to ensure all statutory requirements are met without undue delay or arbitrary denial. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the specific criteria outlined in the Mississippi Code, particularly focusing on sections related to eligibility, background checks, and any disqualifying factors for enhanced firearm permits. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the legal framework established by the Mississippi Legislature for issuing such permits. It ensures that decisions are based on objective, legally defined criteria, promoting fairness and consistency while upholding public safety mandates. This aligns with the ethical obligation of public officials to administer laws faithfully and impartially. An incorrect approach would be to deny the permit solely based on a vague concern about the applicant's demeanor during the application process, without any specific statutory grounds for denial. This fails to adhere to the Mississippi Code, which requires specific, enumerated reasons for permit denial. It introduces subjective bias and bypasses the established legal process, potentially violating the applicant's due process rights. Another incorrect approach would be to approve the permit without completing the mandatory background check due to a backlog in the system. This directly contravenes the explicit requirements of Mississippi law for enhanced firearm permits, which mandate a comprehensive background investigation. Such an oversight creates a significant public safety risk by potentially issuing a permit to an ineligible individual. A third incorrect approach would be to request additional documentation that is not specified as a requirement in the Mississippi Code for an enhanced firearm permit. This imposes an arbitrary burden on the applicant, potentially delaying or preventing them from obtaining a permit for reasons not legally sanctioned, and could be seen as an attempt to circumvent the statutory requirements. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to the Mississippi Code. This involves understanding the specific requirements for enhanced firearm permits, meticulously reviewing all submitted documentation against these requirements, and ensuring that any decision to approve or deny is based solely on objective, legally defined criteria. When faced with ambiguity, seeking clarification from legal counsel or supervisory authorities within the Mississippi Department of Public Safety is crucial to ensure compliance and uphold professional integrity. Question 7. System analysis indicates a Mississippi resident who holds an enhanced firearm permit has received a notification that appears to suggest a potential issue with their permit's active status, though the notification is vague. What is the most prudent and legally compliant course of action for this individual to take? Option A. Contact the Mississippi Department of Public Safety directly to inquire about their permit status and the nature of the notification. Option B. Seek advice and confirmation of their permit status from a private firearms instructor or a local sheriff's department. Option C. Continue carrying a firearm as usual, assuming the notification is a minor administrative oversight that will likely be corrected without intervention. Option D. Cease carrying a firearm immediately and wait for further official communication from the authorities. The correct answer is A. Contact the Mississippi Department of Public Safety directly to inquire about their permit status and the nature of the notification. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a firearm permit holder in Mississippi who has discovered a potential discrepancy in their permit status. The challenge lies in navigating the official channels to rectify the situation without inadvertently violating any regulations or jeopardizing their legal right to carry a firearm. It requires a proactive and informed approach to ensure compliance with Mississippi law. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves directly contacting the Mississippi Department of Public Safety, DPS, to inquire about the permit status and understand the reason for any perceived discrepancy. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the issue with the issuing authority, adhering to the principle of seeking clarification from the source of the regulation. Mississippi law, specifically the Mississippi Code annotated Title 45, Chapter 9, governs firearms and permits. By contacting the DPS, the individual is engaging with the entity responsible for administering these laws and maintaining permit records. This proactive communication ensures that any potential issues are identified and resolved through official channels, maintaining legal compliance and avoiding assumptions that could lead to violations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume the permit is invalid and cease carrying a firearm without verification. This is problematic because it relies on an unconfirmed assumption. While it might seem cautious, it bypasses the opportunity to correct a potential administrative error and could lead to unnecessary inconvenience or a misunderstanding of one's legal rights. The Mississippi Code does not mandate self-revocation based on perceived, unconfirmed issues. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to fix the issue by contacting a private firearms instructor or a local law enforcement agency for definitive permit status confirmation. While these individuals may have knowledge of firearms and general law, they are not the official custodians of firearm permit records in Mississippi. The Mississippi Department of Public Safety is the sole authority for issuing, renewing, and verifying the status of firearm permits. Relying on unofficial sources for such critical information could lead to misinformation and noncompliance with Mississippi's specific permit regulations. A third incorrect approach is to continue carrying a firearm as if no issue exists, hoping it resolves itself. This is a dangerous and legally untenable position. Mississippi law requires individuals to possess a valid permit to carry a concealed firearm. Ignoring a potential problem, even if it's an administrative error, does not absolve the individual of their responsibility to ensure their permit is active and valid. This approach risks violating Mississippi Code Annotated Title 45, Chapter 9, which outlines the requirements for carrying firearms. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should employ a systematic approach. 1. Identify the core issue, a potential problem with permit validity. 2. Determine the authoritative source. The Mississippi Department of Public Safety is the issuing and managing authority for firearm permits. 3. Seek direct clarification. Contact the authoritative source to understand the situation and any necessary steps for resolution. 4. Act based on official guidance. Follow the instructions provided by the Mississippi Department of Public Safety to ensure compliance. 5. Document all communications. Keep records of calls, emails, and any correspondence with the DPS for future reference. Question 8. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Mississippi law enforcement agency reviewing an application for an enhanced firearm permit when the applicant has a prior conviction for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a felony offense in Mississippi? Option A. Thoroughly review the applicant's criminal history to determine if the conviction for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon is a disqualifying offense under Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, and deny the permit if it is. Option B. Deny the permit based on the general concern that anyone with a felony conviction is inherently a risk, without specifically referencing the statutory grounds for denial. Option C. Grant the permit if the applicant provides a letter from their parole officer stating they are in good standing. Option D. Issue the permit while noting the conviction, assuming that since it was some time ago, it no longer poses a risk. The correct answer is A. Thoroughly review the applicant's criminal history to determine if the conviction for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon is a disqualifying offense under Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, and deny the permit if it is. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the applicant's desire for a permit with the stringent requirements of Mississippi law regarding firearm permits, specifically concerning the applicant's past conduct. Misinterpreting or misapplying these laws can lead to either the issuance of a permit to an individual who may pose a risk, or the wrongful denial of a permit to a qualified applicant, both of which have significant legal and ethical ramifications. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with Mississippi Code Annotated Title 45, Chapter 9. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's criminal history, specifically looking for disqualifying offenses as defined by Mississippi law. This means meticulously examining court records and official documentation to determine if the applicant has been convicted of any felony, or any misdemeanor involving the use of a deadly weapon, or any crime of violence, as these are explicitly listed as grounds for denial under Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101. If such a disqualifying offense is found, the application must be denied in accordance with statutory requirements. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the explicit mandates of Mississippi's firearm permit legislation, ensuring public safety and upholding the law. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to overlook or downplay a past conviction for a misdemeanor involving a deadly weapon, assuming it is not significant enough to warrant denial. This fails to recognize that Mississippi law specifically enumerates such offenses as disqualifying, regardless of their classification as misdemeanors. This approach violates the clear intent of the statute to prevent individuals with a history of weapon-related offenses from obtaining permits. Another incorrect approach is to grant the permit based solely on the applicant's assertion that they have learned their lesson and pose no current threat, without independently verifying their criminal record against the statutory disqualifiers. This bypasses the due diligence required by law and relies on subjective assessment rather than objective legal criteria, potentially compromising public safety. Finally, an incorrect approach is to deny the permit without a clear, documented basis in Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, such as a conviction for a disqualifying offense. Issuing a denial without a legally sound reason is arbitrary and can lead to legal challenges against the issuing authority. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role must adopt a systematic and legally grounded decision-making process. This involves 1. Understanding the specific statutory requirements for firearm permits in Mississippi, particularly the disqualifying offenses outlined in Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101. 2. Conducting thorough background checks that verify all aspects of an applicant's criminal history. 3. Objectively applying the law to the facts, without personal bias or subjective interpretations of an applicant's character. 4. Documenting all findings and the rationale for any decision, ensuring transparency and accountability. Question 9. Investigation of an enhanced firearm permit application in Mississippi reveals a history of 3 documented domestic disputes reported to law enforcement within the past 5 years, none of which resulted in criminal charges or convictions. The applicant states these were all minor misunderstandings and that they have no history of mental health issues. What is the most appropriate course of action for the issuing authority? Option A. Deny the permit application solely because the applicant has been involved in domestic disputes, as this automatically disqualifies them from obtaining an enhanced firearm permit in Mississippi. Option B. Conduct a thorough review of all available documentation related to the domestic disputes, seek clarification from the applicant if necessary, and consult with law enforcement or mental health professionals if the information remains ambiguous or raises significant concerns regarding public safety. Option C. Approve the permit application without further investigation, accepting the applicant's explanation that the disputes were minor misunderstandings and that they have no mental health issues. Option D. Immediately deny the permit application based on the reported domestic disputes, as this history indicates a potential risk to public safety regardless of criminal convictions. Correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough review of all available documentation related to the domestic disputes, seek clarification from the applicant if necessary, and consult with law enforcement or mental health professionals if the information remains ambiguous or raises significant concerns regarding public safety. Explanation. Investigation of a firearm permit application in Mississippi presents a unique challenge due to the balance between an individual's right to bear arms and the state's interest in public safety. The applicant's history of domestic disputes, even if not resulting in criminal convictions, raises concerns about their suitability to carry a firearm responsibly. The designated official must navigate Mississippi Code Annotated, MCA, Section 45-9-101 et seq., which governs the issuance of enhanced firearm permits, while also considering the ethical implications of potentially granting a permit to someone with a history that could indicate a propensity for violence or instability. The challenge lies in interpreting the statutory requirements for good moral character and assessing the risk without infringing upon constitutional rights. The best approach involves a thorough, objective review of all submitted documentation and any available public records, focusing on patterns of behavior that might indicate a risk to public safety. This includes carefully evaluating the nature and recency of the domestic disputes, seeking clarification from the applicant if necessary, and consulting with law enforcement or mental health professionals if the information is ambiguous or raises significant concerns. This approach aligns with the spirit of MCA Section 45-9-1013A, which requires the issuing authority to be satisfied that the applicant is a person of good moral character and a proper person to be allowed a permit. It prioritizes a comprehensive understanding of the applicant's history and its potential implications for public safety, adhering to the statutory mandate for careful consideration. An approach that dismisses the domestic disputes solely because they did not result in criminal convictions is professionally unsound. While criminal convictions are a clear disqualifier under MCA Section 45-9-113B, the statute's emphasis on good moral character and being a proper person necessitates a broader assessment. Ignoring documented instances of domestic conflict, even without formal charges, fails to adequately address the potential risk to public safety and could be seen as a dereliction of the official's duty to ensure responsible firearm ownership. Another professionally unacceptable approach would be to deny the permit solely based on the applicant's assertion that the disputes were minor or misunderstood, without any independent verification or further investigation. This bypasses the due diligence required by the statute and places undue reliance on the applicant's self-serving statements. The issuing authority has a responsibility to independently assess the information provided and ensure the applicant meets the statutory criteria. Finally, an approach that relies on personal bias or assumptions about individuals involved in domestic disputes, rather than a fact-based assessment of the provided information and relevant statutes, is unethical and unprofessional. The decision must be grounded in the law and the evidence, not on prejudice. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing statutes and regulations. This involves identifying all relevant legal criteria and any discretionary elements. Next, gather all available information, including application materials, supporting documents, and any legally accessible public records. Critically evaluate this information, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, and potential red flags. If ambiguities exist, seek clarification or additional information through appropriate channels. Consult with relevant experts or authorities when necessary. Finally, make a decision based on a comprehensive assessment of the facts against the legal and ethical standards, ensuring the decision is well documented and justifiable. Question 10. Assessment of the financial commitment for a Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit requires careful calculation. If the initial permit fee is $100, the required training course costs $150, the annual renewal fee is $50, and an applicant reasonably projects spending $200 per year on ammunition for practice, what is the total projected cost of obtaining and maintaining the permit over a 5-year period? Option A, $100 initial fee plus $150 training plus $50/year *4 renewals equals $100 plus $150 plus $200 equals $450. Option B, $100 initial fee plus $150 training plus $200/year *5 years equals $100 plus $150 plus $1,000 equals $1,250. Option C, $100 initial fee plus $150 training plus $50/year *4 renewals plus $200/year *5 years equals $100 plus $150 plus $200 plus $1,000 equals $1,450. Option D, $100 initial fee plus $150 training plus $50/year *5 renewals plus $200/year *5 years equals $100 plus $150 plus $250 plus $1,000 equals $1,500. The correct answer is C, $100 initial fee plus $150 training plus $50/year *4 renewals plus $200/year *5 years equals $100 plus $150 plus $200 plus $1,000 equals $1,450. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the applicant to accurately calculate the total cost of firearm ownership, including recurring expenses, within a specific regulatory context. Miscalculation could lead to an inability to meet financial obligations related to permit renewal or responsible firearm storage, potentially impacting their eligibility for a Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit. Careful judgment is required to ensure all applicable fees and projected costs are considered. The best approach involves a systematic calculation of all direct and projected costs associated with maintaining a firearm permit in Mississippi. This includes the initial permit fee, the cost of required training, the projected cost of ammunition for practice, and the annual renewal fee. The formula for total projected cost over a 5-year period would be total cost equals initial permit fee plus training cost plus annual renewal fee *4 plus projected annual ammunition cost *5. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the financial requirements for obtaining and maintaining the permit over a reasonable timeframe, as implicitly expected by the Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit application process. It accounts for both one-time and recurring expenses, providing a realistic financial picture. An incorrect approach would be to only consider the initial permit fee and the cost of training, neglecting the recurring renewal fees and the ongoing costs of ammunition for practice. This failure to account for future expenses could lead to an underestimation of the financial commitment, potentially causing the applicant to be unable to renew their permit when required. Another incorrect approach would be to only calculate the cost for the first year, ignoring the subsequent renewal periods and the long-term financial implications of firearm ownership. This overlooks the sustained responsibility associated with holding a permit. A third incorrect approach would be to include speculative or unrelated expenses, such as the cost of accessories not mandated by the permit requirements, or to use an arbitrary number for ammunition costs without a basis in reasonable practice frequency. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the specific financial obligations tied to the permit itself. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes accuracy, completeness, and adherence to the specific requirements of the permitting authority. This involves breaking down the problem into its component costs, researching the exact fees and projected expenses, and applying a logical calculation method to arrive at a realistic total. When in doubt about specific costs, consulting official Mississippi Department of Public Safety resources or the Permit Application Guidelines is crucial. Question 11. The monitoring system indicates that a Mississippi firearm permit holder's permit expired 3 months ago, and they have not yet initiated the renewal process, believing they would be notified. What is the most appropriate course of action for the permit holder to regain compliance? Option A. Immediately begin the full renewal application process as if applying for a new permit, understanding that the previous permit is no longer valid and requires re-establishment of eligibility. Option B. Continue carrying the firearm as usual, assuming the renewal process will be expedited once initiated and that the expired permit will be retroactively validated. Option C. Wait for an official renewal notice from the Mississippi Department of Public Safety before taking any action, as this is the standard procedure. Option D. Contact the Mississippi Department of Public Safety to inquire about a grace period for late renewals and request a waiver for the expired period. The correct answer is A. Immediately begin the full renewal application process as if applying for a new permit, understanding that the previous permit is no longer valid and requires re-establishment of eligibility. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a potential lapse in adherence to Mississippi's enhanced firearm permit requirements, specifically concerning the ongoing responsibility of permit holders. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the permit holder to proactively manage their compliance status, rather than passively assuming it remains valid. The core issue revolves around the permit holder's duty to stay informed about their permit's expiration and renewal procedures, a responsibility that extends beyond the initial issuance. The best professional approach involves the permit holder actively tracking their permit's expiration date and initiating the renewal process well in advance of its expiry. This proactive stance is crucial because Mississippi law, like many jurisdictions, requires a valid permit to legally carry a concealed firearm. Failure to renew on time results in an expired permit, rendering the individual noncompliant with state statutes. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation of a permit holder to maintain legal standing and public safety by ensuring their authorization to carry is current. An incorrect approach involves assuming the permit remains valid indefinitely or until a renewal notice is received. This passive stance is problematic as it places the onus on the state to remind the permit holder, which is not a guaranteed service and can lead to unintentional lapses in compliance. Such an assumption directly contravenes the permit holder's responsibility to manage their own legal status. Another incorrect approach is to wait until the permit has already expired to begin the renewal process. This is a significant regulatory failure, as it means the individual has been carrying a firearm without a valid permit for an unknown period, potentially violating Mississippi law and jeopardizing public safety. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and respect for the legal framework governing firearm permits. Finally, an incorrect approach is to rely solely on memory for the expiration date without any external tracking mechanism. While seemingly simple, human memory is fallible, and this method significantly increases the risk of an expired permit, leading to the same legal and safety concerns as waiting until after expiration. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to managing their firearm permit. This includes immediately noting the expiration date in a reliable calendar or reminder system upon receiving the permit, setting multiple reminders leading up to the expiration, and familiarizing themselves with the Mississippi Department of Public Safety's renewal procedures and timelines. This ensures continuous compliance and upholds the responsibilities associated with carrying a firearm. Question 12. Market research demonstrates that individuals seeking enhanced firearm permits in Mississippi may have passed legal encounters that could affect their eligibility. Considering the specific statutes and regulations governing firearm permits in Mississippi, which of the following actions represents the most prudent and legally compliant approach for an applicant who had a misdemeanor charge dismissed years ago and believes the record was expunged? Option A. Proactively consult with a Mississippi licensed attorney specializing in firearm law to determine the specific disclosure requirements and implications of the dismissed charge on the permit application. Option B. Assume that since the charge was dismissed and expunged, it does not need to be disclosed on the permit application. Option C. Rely on advice from online forums and acquaintances regarding the legal impact of dismissed and expunged charges on firearm permit eligibility in Mississippi. Option D. Downplay the significance of the dismissed charge on the application, hoping it will not be discovered during the background check. The correct answer is A. Proactively consult with a Mississippi licensed attorney specializing in firearm law to determine the specific disclosure requirements and implications of the dismissed charge on the permit application. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate the complex interplay between personal circumstances and the legal requirements for firearm ownership in Mississippi. The core challenge lies in accurately assessing whether a past legal issue, even if seemingly resolved, could impact current eligibility for a firearm permit under Mississippi law. Misinterpreting or misrepresenting this information can lead to severe legal consequences, including denial of the permit, criminal charges, and a permanent record that could affect future rights. Careful judgment is required to ensure full compliance with Mississippi's firearm regulations. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a proactive and transparent approach to addressing the past legal issue. This means thoroughly researching Mississippi's firearm permit laws, specifically focusing on disqualifying offenses and the process for addressing past convictions or expungements. The individual should consult with a qualified legal professional in Mississippi who specializes in firearm law to understand how their specific past situation is treated under state statutes. This approach ensures that the application is accurate, complete, and compliant with all legal requirements, thereby maximizing the chances of a successful permit application and avoiding potential legal pitfalls. This aligns with the ethical obligation to be truthful and to adhere strictly to the law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves assuming that because the charges were dismissed or the record was expunged, it no longer needs to be disclosed. Mississippi law requires disclosure of certain past legal encounters, even if they did not result in a conviction, depending on the nature of the offense. Failing to disclose relevant information, even if believed to be expunged, can be considered a misrepresentation on the permit application, leading to denial and potential legal penalties. Another incorrect approach is to rely on informal advice from friends or online forums regarding the legal implications of the past charges. Such sources are not authoritative and may not accurately reflect Mississippi's specific firearm regulations or the nuances of expungement laws. This can lead to a misunderstanding of eligibility requirements and a flawed application, potentially resulting in denial and further complications. A third incorrect approach is to attempt to conceal or downplay the past legal issue on the application. Mississippi's background check process is designed to uncover relevant information. Any attempt to hide or misrepresent past legal involvement is a direct violation of the application's truthfulness requirements and will likely result in immediate denial and potential legal repercussions. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a systematic approach. First, identify the specific jurisdiction's laws governing firearm permits, in this case, Mississippi. Second, thoroughly research the eligibility criteria and disqualifying factors outlined in those laws. Third, if personal circumstances present potential issues, seek expert legal counsel within that jurisdiction to understand how those circumstances are addressed by the law. Fourth, be completely truthful and transparent on all application materials, disclosing all required information accurately. Finally, maintain documentation of all research, consultations, and application submissions for future reference. Question 13. Market research demonstrates a growing interest in understanding the nuances of firearm permit renewal in Mississippi. An individual holding a Mississippi enhanced firearm permit believes the mandatory training they completed prior to their initial permit issuance was superficial and did not adequately prepare them for responsible firearm handling in all scenarios. As their permit approaches renewal, they are concerned about truthfully attesting to meeting the renewal requirements. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for this individual? Option A. Complete a firearm training course from an out-of-state organization that the individual deems more comprehensive, and then attest to having met the Mississippi renewal requirements based on this alternative training. Option B. Falsely attest to having completed adequate training, believing that the state's oversight is minimal and their personal assessment of training sufficiency is paramount. Option C. Allow the enhanced firearm permit to expire without renewal, deciding that the perceived inadequacy of the training makes continued permit holding untenable. Option D. Honestly attest to completing the required training as mandated by Mississippi law for permit renewal, and if concerned about the quality of past training, seek out and complete additional, recognized Mississippi-approved training to enhance their skills before the renewal period. The correct answer is D. Honestly attest to completing the required training as mandated by Mississippi law for permit renewal, and if concerned about the quality of past training, seek out and complete additional, recognized Mississippi-approved training to enhance their skills before the renewal period. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance personal beliefs and potential legal obligations with the practical realities of firearm ownership and the specific requirements of Mississippi law. The challenge lies in accurately interpreting and applying the Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit requirements, particularly concerning the mandatory training and its implications for permit renewal, while also considering the ethical implications of potentially misrepresenting one's training status. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves accurately reporting the completion of the required Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit training, even if the individual believes the training was insufficient or did not meet their personal standards. Mississippi law mandates specific training for permit holders, and the renewal process requires attestation to meeting these requirements. Honesty and adherence to the statutory requirements are paramount. This approach aligns with the legal framework of Mississippi, which outlines the specific training necessary for permit issuance and renewal. Ethically, it upholds the principle of truthfulness in official applications and respects the legislative intent behind firearm permit regulations. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves falsely attesting to the completion of the required training when the individual believes it was inadequate. This is a direct violation of Mississippi law regarding permit renewal applications. Ethically, it constitutes dishonesty and misrepresentation to a state authority, undermining the integrity of the permitting system. Another incorrect approach is to simply allow the permit to expire without renewing it due to dissatisfaction with the training, without taking any action to address the perceived deficiency or understand the renewal process. While not actively deceptive, this fails to engage with the legal requirements for continued lawful firearm possession under the enhanced permit system, and misses an opportunity to seek clarification or alternative training that might satisfy the state's requirements. A further incorrect approach is to seek out and complete training that is not recognized or approved by Mississippi for enhanced firearm permits, believing it to be superior. While well-intentioned, this does not fulfill the specific statutory requirements for the enhanced permit and would lead to a false attestation if reported as meeting the state's mandate. This approach fails to adhere to the specific regulatory framework established by Mississippi for enhanced firearm permits. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should first consult the official Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit statutes and any accompanying guidance from the Mississippi Department of Public Safety. If there is ambiguity or concern about the adequacy of approved training, the professional should seek clarification directly from the issuing authority or consult with legal counsel specializing in firearm law in Mississippi. The decision-making process should prioritize legal compliance, ethical conduct, and accurate representation of facts to state agencies. Question 14. Market research demonstrates a growing interest among Mississippi residents in acquiring firearms for personal protection. A client approaches a licensed firearms dealer in Mississippi, expressing a desire to purchase a specific semi-automatic pistol. The client states they possess a valid Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for the firearms dealer to take? Option A. Proceed with the sale of the semi-automatic pistol immediately, relying on the client's verbal confirmation of possessing a valid Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit. Option B. Verify the validity and status of the client's Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit and confirm that the specific semi-automatic pistol is legally permissible for acquisition and possession by a permit holder under Mississippi law. Option C. Inform the client that due to potential complexities, the sale cannot proceed without a court order, regardless of their permit status. Option D. Sell the semi-automatic pistol to the client, assuming that possession of a Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit automatically legalizes the ownership of any firearm. The correct answer is B. Verify the validity and status of the client's Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit and confirm that the specific semi-automatic pistol is legally permissible for acquisition and possession by a permit holder under Mississippi law. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a client's stated desire for a specific firearm and the potential legal ramifications of fulfilling that request without proper due diligence. The professional must navigate the complexities of Mississippi firearm laws, specifically concerning permit requirements and the legal acquisition of firearms, while also upholding ethical obligations to the client and the public. The challenge lies in balancing client service with legal compliance and responsible firearm sales practices. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves verifying the client's eligibility for a Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit and confirming that the desired firearm is legally permissible for them to own and possess under Mississippi law. This entails a thorough review of the client's permit status, ensuring it is current and valid, and cross-referencing the specific firearm model against any restrictions or prohibitions applicable to permit holders in Mississippi. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to Mississippi's regulatory framework for firearm sales and possession, prioritizing legal compliance and responsible conduct. Mississippi law mandates that individuals must possess a valid permit to carry a concealed handgun, and sellers have a responsibility to ensure the buyer is legally entitled to acquire and possess the firearm. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the sale based solely on the client's assertion of having an enhanced firearm permit without independent verification. This fails to meet the professional standard of care and violates the spirit, if not the letter, of Mississippi firearm regulations, which place a burden on the seller to ensure legal compliance. It risks facilitating an illegal transfer if the permit is expired, revoked, or if the firearm itself is prohibited. Another incorrect approach is to assume that because the client possesses a permit, any firearm they wish to purchase is automatically legal for them. This overlooks potential restrictions on specific types of firearms or modifications that might be prohibited even for permit holders under Mississippi law. It demonstrates a lack of comprehensive understanding of the nuances of firearm legality beyond the basic permit requirement. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's request outright without attempting to verify their eligibility or the firearm's legality. While caution is important, a complete refusal without investigation can be unprofessional and may alienate a client who is otherwise legally entitled to purchase a firearm. The professional obligation is to facilitate legal transactions, not to arbitrarily deny them. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field should adopt a systematic approach to firearm sales. This begins with clearly identifying the client's intent and the specific firearm in question. The next critical step is to verify the client's legal eligibility, which in Mississippi includes confirming the validity of their enhanced firearm permit. Simultaneously, the professional must ascertain the legal status of the firearm itself, ensuring it complies with all state and federal regulations. If any doubt or discrepancy arises, further investigation or consultation with legal counsel or relevant authorities is warranted before proceeding. This layered verification process ensures both client satisfaction and strict adherence to the law. Question 15. Market research demonstrates that applicants for enhanced firearm permits in Mississippi may hold strong personal convictions about their right to self-defense. When reviewing an application, what is the most appropriate approach to ensure compliance with Mississippi's concealed firearm permit laws? Option A. Objectively verify the applicant's eligibility against all statutory requirements and disqualifying factors outlined in Mississippi Code, annotated Title 45, Chapter 9, irrespective of their personal beliefs about self-defense. Option B. Deny the permit if the applicant expresses a strong or assertive belief in their right to self-defense, as this may indicate a potential for aggressive behavior. Option C. Postpone the decision and request extensive personal history beyond what is legally required by Mississippi statutes, hoping the applicant will withdraw. Option D. Base the decision on a personal assessment of the applicant's character and perceived trustworthiness, even if they technically meet all listed legal criteria. The correct answer is A. Objectively verify the applicant's eligibility against all statutory requirements and disqualifying factors outlined in Mississippi Code Annotated Title 45, Chapter 9, irrespective of their personal beliefs about self-defense. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance their personal beliefs and potential biases with the legal requirements and ethical obligations of carrying a firearm for self-defense in Mississippi. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that any decision regarding firearm permit eligibility is based solely on objective legal criteria, not subjective personal judgments or assumptions about an applicant's character or intentions. Mississippi law, like most jurisdictions, sets specific criteria for permit issuance, and adherence to these is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective review of the applicant's background against the specific criteria outlined in Mississippi Code Annotated Title 45, Chapter 9, which governs concealed firearm permits. This approach prioritizes adherence to the established legal framework. Specifically, it requires verifying that the applicant meets all statutory requirements, such as age, residency, completion of a firearm safety course, and crucially, that they do not fall under any disqualifying conditions listed in the statute, such as felony convictions, certain misdemeanor convictions, or documented history of domestic violence. This method ensures that the decision is legally sound, non-discriminatory, and upholds the integrity of the permitting process by focusing on objective, verifiable facts as mandated by Mississippi law. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves making a decision based on a personal feeling or assumption about the applicant's perceived trustworthiness or potential for misuse of the firearm, even if they meet all stated legal requirements. This is ethically unacceptable as it introduces subjective bias, which is explicitly prohibited in the application of law. Mississippi law does not grant permit officials discretion to deny a permit based on personal intuition or generalized concerns about public safety that are not tied to specific statutory disqualifiers. Another incorrect approach is to deny the permit solely because the applicant expresses a strong belief in their right to self-defense, without any evidence that this belief translates into a disqualifying characteristic under Mississippi law. The manner in which someone expresses their beliefs can be relevant if it indicates a propensity for violence or disregard for law. The belief itself, when aligned with legal rights, is not a basis for denial. This approach fails to distinguish between a lawful assertion of rights and a genuine threat. A further incorrect approach is to delay the decision indefinitely or request additional information that is not legally mandated by Mississippi's concealed firearm permit statutes, in the hope that the applicant will withdraw their application. This constitutes a failure to act within the prescribed legal timeframe and can be seen as an attempt to circumvent the statutory process, which is both unprofessional and potentially illegal. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making framework that is rooted in strict adherence to the governing statutes and regulations. This involves 1. Understanding the precise legal criteria for permit eligibility and disqualification, as defined by Mississippi Code Annotated Title 45, Chapter 9. 2. Conducting an objective and thorough background check to verify all factual elements against these criteria. 3. Disregarding personal biases, assumptions, or generalized fears that are not supported by specific legal disqualifiers. 4. Making a timely decision based solely on the evidence gathered and its alignment with the law. 5. Documenting the decision-making process clearly, referencing the specific legal provisions that support the outcome. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a Mississippi firearm permit applicant has a documented arrest for assault approximately 5 years ago, but the disposition of that case is not immediately clear from the initial application. What is the most appropriate next step for the licensing authority to take? Option A. Conduct a thorough investigation into the disposition of the past assault arrest to determine if it resulted in a disqualifying conviction or court order under Mississippi law before making a decision on the permit application. Option B. Rely on the applicant's statement that the arrest was a misunderstanding and proceed with issuing the permit without further verification. Option C. Automatically deny the permit application due to the presence of an arrest for assault, regardless of the case's final outcome. Option D. Issue the firearm permit immediately, assuming the applicant's current presentation suggests they are not a risk. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough investigation into the disposition of the past assault arrest to determine if it resulted in a disqualifying conviction or court order under Mississippi law before making a decision on the permit application. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving the responsible handling of a firearm permit application, where a potential applicant has a history that could raise concerns under Mississippi law regarding firearm possession. The challenge lies in balancing the applicant's rights with public safety, requiring a thorough understanding of Mississippi's specific firearm permit regulations and the legal standards for disqualification. Careful judgment is needed to avoid both arbitrary denial and the issuance of a permit to someone who may pose a risk. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's criminal history, specifically looking for convictions or adjudication that are explicitly disqualifying under Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, etc. This approach requires diligent investigation to ascertain the nature and disposition of any past legal entanglements, such as arrests for violent crimes or domestic violence, and to determine if they resulted in a disqualifying conviction or order. The justification for this approach is rooted in Mississippi law, which outlines specific criteria for permit eligibility and disqualification. A thorough review ensures adherence to these statutory requirements, upholding the integrity of the permitting process and public safety. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to automatically deny the permit based solely on the mention of a past arrest for assault, without investigating the outcome of that arrest. This fails to acknowledge that an arrest does not equate to a conviction, and that Mississippi law typically disqualifies individuals based on convictions or specific court orders, not mere arrests. This approach risks violating the applicant's due process rights and misinterpreting the scope of disqualifying offenses. Another incorrect approach is to issue the permit without any further inquiry, assuming that the applicant's current demeanor is sufficient evidence of their suitability. This ignores the statutory requirements for a permit and the potential for past offenses to still be relevant under Mississippi law, even if not immediately obvious. It prioritizes expediency over due diligence and public safety. A further incorrect approach is to rely on anecdotal information or assumptions about the applicant's character without verifying it against objective legal standards. This is subjective and does not align with the legally defined criteria for firearm permit eligibility in Mississippi. It introduces bias and undermines the fairness and impartiality of the permitting process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this role should employ a systematic decision-making process. First, they must thoroughly understand the specific disqualifying criteria outlined in Mississippi's firearm permit laws. Second, they must conduct a diligent investigation into each applicant's background, focusing on verifiable facts and legal outcomes. Third, they must apply the law objectively to the facts gathered, ensuring that decisions are based on statutory requirements and not on personal biases or assumptions. Finally, they must maintain clear and accurate documentation of their review process and the basis for their decision. Question 17. Market research demonstrates that individuals holding a Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit may encounter situations where their personal feelings or perceptions about certain individuals or groups could influence their decision-making regarding carrying their firearm. Considering the legal framework of Mississippi, which of the following represents the most appropriate and legally compliant approach for a permit holder in such circumstances? Option A. Carry the firearm in accordance with all applicable Mississippi laws and regulations for enhanced firearm permit holders, ensuring the permit is valid and the individual is not violating any other statutes, irrespective of personal feelings towards any individual or group encountered. Option B. Carry the firearm but be prepared to display it, or make its presence known if encountering individuals or groups towards whom the permit holder harbors negative personal feelings, as a form of self-protection based on perceived threat. Option C. Interpret the Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit as granting personal discretion to carry only in situations where the permit holder feels entirely comfortable and has no negative personal perceptions of those present. Option D. Refrain from carrying the firearm if personal feelings of unease or bias arise towards specific individuals or groups, even if the permit is valid and no other laws are being violated. The correct answer is A. Carry the firearm in accordance with all applicable Mississippi laws and regulations for enhanced firearm permit holders, ensuring the permit is valid and the individual is not violating any other statutes, irrespective of personal feelings towards any individual or group encountered. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance their personal beliefs and potential biases with the legal requirements and ethical obligations of carrying a firearm under a Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit. The core difficulty lies in ensuring that personal feelings do not impede the lawful exercise of a right granted by the state, nor lead to discriminatory practices. Careful judgment is required to uphold both personal integrity and legal compliance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves understanding and strictly adhering to Mississippi law regarding the carrying of firearms with an enhanced firearm permit. This means recognizing that the permit grants the legal right to carry, and personal opinions or beliefs about specific individuals or groups should not influence the decision to exercise this right, provided all legal requirements are met. The Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit is issued based on meeting specific criteria, and its validity is not contingent on the permit holder's personal approval of those they encounter. Therefore, the correct approach is to carry the firearm in accordance with Mississippi law, irrespective of personal feelings towards any individual or group, as long as the permit is valid and the individual is not violating any other laws. This aligns with the principle that legal rights are to be exercised without prejudice. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves allowing personal feelings or biases about a particular individual or group to dictate whether or not to carry the firearm, even when legally permitted to do so. This is a failure to uphold the legal right granted by the Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit, and could be seen as an abdication of a lawful privilege based on subjective and potentially discriminatory reasoning. It suggests that personal sentiment can override legal entitlement, which is contrary to the purpose of a permit system designed for lawful carry. Another incorrect approach is to interpret the permit as granting discretion to refuse to carry in certain locations or situations based on personal comfort levels or perceived threats that are not legally defined as prohibiting carry. While situational awareness is important, the Enhanced Firearm Permit in Mississippi is issued to allow for lawful carry in many places. Arbitrarily deciding not to carry based on personal unease, without a legal basis for such a restriction, undermines the utility and intent of the permit. A further incorrect approach would be to carry the firearm in a manner that is not compliant with Mississippi's specific laws and regulations for enhanced permit holders, such as brandishing or displaying the weapon unnecessarily, due to personal feelings of unease or a desire to intimidate. This goes beyond the scope of lawful carry and enters into potentially illegal or unethical conduct, regardless of the permit's existence. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach situations involving their enhanced firearm permit with a clear understanding of Mississippi's legal framework. The decision-making process should prioritize legal compliance above all else. This involves 1. Knowing the specific rights and restrictions associated with the Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit. 2. Separating personal beliefs and emotions from legal obligations and rights. 3. Acting in accordance with the law, ensuring the permit is valid and all carrying regulations are followed. 4. Recognizing that the permit is a legal authorization, not a tool for personal expression of bias or discomfort. Question 18. What factors determine the legality of carrying a firearm in another state with a Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit? Option A. The assumption that all states recognize Mississippi firearm permits due to the permit's enhanced status. Option B. The duration of time the individual has held a valid Mississippi Enhanced Firearm Permit. Option C. the existence of a formal reciprocity agreement between Mississippi and the destination state, and adherence to the destination state's specific firearm carry laws and regulations. Option D. Relying on advice from fellow firearm owners about whether a permit is valid in another state. The correct answer is C. The existence of a formal reciprocity agreement between Mississippi and the destination state, and adherence to the destination state's specific firearm carry laws and regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to navigate the nuances of Mississippi's firearm laws concerning permit reciprocity and the potential legal ramifications of carrying a firearm in a state where their permit may not be recognized. Misinterpreting these laws can lead to serious legal consequences, including arrest and prosecution. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance with all applicable state statutes. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively researching and understanding the specific firearm permit laws of any state one intends to carry a firearm in, particularly concerning reciprocity agreements with Mississippi. This approach ensures that the individual is aware of whether their Mississippi enhanced firearm permit is recognized in the destination state, and if any additional requirements or restrictions apply. This aligns with the ethical obligation to act responsibly and lawfully when possessing a firearm, and directly addresses the legal framework governing firearm carry across state lines, as outlined by Mississippi law and the laws of the visited state. Incorrect approach is analysis. Failing to research the destination state's laws and assuming reciprocity based solely on having a Mississippi enhanced firearm permit is a significant regulatory failure. Mississippi law, while granting permit holders the right to carry, does not unilaterally extend that right to other states without established reciprocity agreements. This assumption can lead to a violation of the destination state's firearm laws, which may not recognize Mississippi permits or may have stricter requirements. Relying on informal advice from friends or online forums without verifying the information through official state resources constitutes an ethical and regulatory lapse. Such sources are not authoritative and can provide inaccurate or outdated information, leading to unintentional noncompliance. The responsibility for understanding and adhering to the law rests solely with the permit holder. Carrying a firearm without confirming the destination state's laws, even if the Mississippi enhanced firearm permit is valid within Mississippi, is a direct violation of the principle of responsible firearm ownership. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for the legal requirements of carrying a firearm in a jurisdiction outside of one's home state. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and diligent approach to understanding legal requirements. When dealing with cross-jurisdictional issues like firearm permit reciprocity, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the relevant jurisdictions, Mississippi and the destination state. 2. Consulting official government websites or legal resources for each jurisdiction to ascertain their specific firearm laws and reciprocity agreements. 3. Documenting the findings to ensure accuracy and for future reference. 4. Acting strictly in accordance with the confirmed legal requirements of all involved jurisdictions. Question 19. Market research demonstrates that individuals seeking enhanced firearm permits in Mississippi often grapple with the nuances of self-defense scenarios. Considering the legal framework of Mississippi, which of the following represents the most prudent and legally sound approach when encountering a potentially threatening situation that might necessitate the use of a firearm? Option A. Act immediately upon any perceived threat or feeling of unease, assuming the worst-case scenario to ensure personal safety, even if the threat is not immediately apparent or unavoidable. Option B. Rely on personal intuition and past experiences to determine the level of threat, prioritizing a proactive stance that may involve brandishing or discharging a firearm to deter potential aggressors. Option C. Utilize a firearm preemptively if there is a possibility of future harm, or if the individual feels uncomfortable or threatened by another person's presence, regardless of an immediate danger. Option D. Assess the situation based on the immediate and unavoidable nature of the threat, requiring a reasonable belief of imminent death or great bodily harm, and only resort to firearm use as a last resort after exhausting all other reasonable options. The correct answer is D. Assess the situation based on the immediate and unavoidable nature of the threat, requiring a reasonable belief of imminent death or great bodily harm, and only resort to firearm use as a last resort after exhausting all other reasonable options. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an individual to balance their personal beliefs and perceived threats with the legal requirements for carrying a firearm in Mississippi. The challenge lies in accurately assessing whether a situation constitutes an immediate, unavoidable threat that justifies the use of deadly force, and understanding the legal ramifications of misjudgment. Mississippi law, like all jurisdiction, places a high burden on individual to demonstrate that their actions were necessary for self-defense. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough understanding and strict adherence to Mississippi self-defense laws, specifically focusing on the imminent danger standard. This means recognizing that the threat must be immediate, unavoidable, and involve a reasonable belief of death or great bodily harm. It requires a calm, rational assessment of the situation, prioritizing de-escalation and avoidance of conflict whenever possible, and only resorting to the use of a firearm as a last resort when all other reasonable options have been exhausted, and the threat is immediate and unavoidable. This aligns with Mississippi Code Annotated 97-3-15, which outlines justifiable homicide and the conditions under which deadly force may be used. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on a generalized feeling of unease or a perceived future threat. Mississippi law requires an immediate and unavoidable danger, not a speculative or potential one. Acting on a generalized fear without an imminent threat could lead to unlawful use of force. Another incorrect approach is to assume that any perceived threat, regardless of its immediacy or severity, justifies the immediate use of a firearm. This disregards the legal requirement for the threat to be one of death or great bodily harm and the necessity of the force used. It fails to consider alternatives to deadly force, which is a critical component of legal self-defense. A further incorrect approach is to allow personal biases or past experiences to dictate the assessment of a current threat. Legal justification for self-defense must be based on an objective assessment of the immediate circumstances, not subjective interpretations influenced by external factors. This can lead to discriminatory or disproportionate responses. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and objective threat assessment. This involves 1. Understanding the specific legal definitions of imminent danger and justifiable use of force in Mississippi. 2. Practicing situational awareness to identify potential threats early. 3. Evaluating the immediacy, severity, and unavoidability of any perceived threat. 4. Considering all reasonable alternatives to the use of deadly force, including de-escalation and retreat where feasible. 5. Acting only when the threat meets the legal threshold for self-defense, and the use of deadly force is the absolute last resort. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that a Mississippi resident is considering applying for an enhanced firearm permit and has identified a firearm with a base price of $750. The current Mississippi state sales tax rate is 7%. The application fee for an enhanced firearm permit is $100. The applicant estimates they will purchase approximately $200 worth of ammunition annually. If the applicant plans to keep the firearm for 5 years, what is the total estimated cost of firearm ownership and permit maintenance over this period, assuming the sales tax is applied only to the initial firearm purchase and the permit fee and ammunition costs are paid annually? Option A, $4 $225. Option B, $3 $975. Option C, $4 $075. Option D, $3 $875. The correct answer is A, $4 $225. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge by requiring the applicant to accurately calculate the total cost of firearm ownership, including not only the initial purchase price, but also recurring fees and potential taxes, within the specific regulatory context of Mississippi. Miscalculation could lead to an underestimation of financial commitment, potentially impacting the applicant's ability to maintain legal firearm ownership and adhere to Mississippi's firearm permit requirements. Careful judgment is required to ensure all relevant costs are identified and correctly applied. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves a systematic calculation that accounts for the firearm's base price, the Mississippi state sales tax rate, the cost of the enhanced firearm permit application fee, and the estimated annual cost of ammunition. This method is correct because it directly addresses all quantifiable financial obligations associated with obtaining and maintaining an enhanced firearm permit in Mississippi as outlined by state law and administrative rules. Specifically, Mississippi Code Annotated Section 45-9-101, et seq. Governs firearm permits, and while it doesn't mandate a specific tax on firearms themselves, general state sales tax applies to retail purchases. The enhanced permit fee is a statutory requirement, and ammunition costs are a predictable recurring expense for any firearm owner. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to only consider the firearm's purchase price and the permit application fee. This fails to account for the Mississippi state sales tax, which is a mandatory component of retail transactions, and therefore a direct cost of acquiring the firearm. It also ignores the ongoing financial commitment of ammunition, which is essential for practical firearm use and training, and thus a relevant part of the overall cost of ownership. Another incorrect approach would be to calculate the total cost by adding the firearm's price, the permit fee, and a generalized estimate for shooting expenses without specifying ammunition. This is flawed because it lacks precision. Shooting expenses is too vague and could encompass a wide range of costs, some of which may not be directly related to the core requirements of firearm ownership and permit maintenance. The focus should be on quantifiable, recurring costs directly tied to the firearm and its legal operation. A third incorrect approach would be to sum the firearm's price, the permit fee, and the cost of a firearm safety course, while omitting the state sales tax and ammunition costs. While a safety course might be beneficial or even required in some contexts, it is not a direct, recurring cost of permit maintenance or firearm acquisition in the same way as sales tax or ammunition. Furthermore, omitting the sales tax and ammunition represents a significant underestimation of the total financial outlay. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a comprehensive cost-benefit analysis framework. This involves identifying all direct and indirect costs associated with an activity, including initial acquisition, recurring fees, taxes, and essential operational expenses. For firearm permit applications in Mississippi, this means meticulously applying the state's sales tax rate to the firearm's purchase price, adding the statutory enhanced permit application fee, and estimating realistic annual ammunition costs based on anticipated usage. This methodical approach ensures accurate financial planning and compliance with all applicable state regulations.